Brenda, welcome. It's so nice to see you, to see your tree right before the holidays kick off.
Thanks for having me on, Baiba. I'm really excited to be here and talk to your audience.
Great. So, can you tell us a little more about what it is that you are doing and professionally focused on right now?
Well, I'm a business coach. I have my own business, so business owner, entrepreneur, and I work specifically with midlife women, helping them make that transition from corporate into launching their dream business. And I've been doing that now for 6 years. And prior to that, I was in corporate. I was an executive in corporate, going through all the things that kind of my audience, my members in my community are going through now, midlife, balancing motherhood, relationships, all the things, traveling. Yeah. So, I mean, that's been sort of like the last evolution of like my life over the last like 5, 6 years to where I am now.
So, it sounds like it's been your own journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think prior to that, I was probably following someone else's checklist, whether it was sort of mentorship from my mom or past employers, great bosses that I had, coaches that told me, hey, these are directions you should go in your career, your life. And I think probably around, well, I was 48 at the time. I really wanted to take a step back and rethink, what was that next trajectory going to look like the next 50 years on the planet? Because my goal is to live to 100. So, up until that point, I think a lot of it had been prescribed. There was sort of like a checklist to follow, like go to school, get the job, build your career, get married, have kids, get the house, the car, the dog, all those great things that I'm, very grateful that I had the opportunities, the privilege, the education, the support of my family and community to do those things.
Mhm.
But I think it got to a point too where it's like I felt I was doing something for other people. I didn't know how to set boundaries. I said yes a lot. I felt that that was like a good thing to do as a leader or as a mother or whatever those things were, any hat that I used to wear. And I started learning more about, okay, well, if I set a vision and have values for my life that are important to me and I have goals that come first for me, that it's not selfish and it's actually helping to support other people too. Because when I'm actually feeling good about myself and feeling whole and complete, then the other relationships I have with the people in my life that are important to me feel better.
So many amazing things you said there in that snippet. And what I love, one of the things that stood out to me and what I love is that you said you were 48,
Hmm.
kind of when you were at that point when you were thinking, questioning, planning, re-envisioning, all the things. Because so much of the times I even hear women who are younger in their 30s,
Hmm.
40s, who think that they've gone too far down the road, of having a career already, that it's too late to reinvent anything, that it's almost seems daunting or impossible to
Right.
make a shift. First of all, because they don't know what to shift to, and second of
Hmm.
all, because by that time you have a family, kids, some sort of established bills, house and
Responsibilities, yeah,
responsibilities.
obligations. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like all these things that we are hearing why it's impossible or
Hmm.
almost impossible.
Yeah, and here's the thing, I was probably thinking all those same thoughts 10 years earlier. It just took me 10 years to actually do something about it because I was probably questioning, doubting, and also maybe even hearing from people that were important to me in my life saying, you know what, you're good. Like you should just be grateful for what you have. Don't rock the boat. Don't leave your corporate job. It's too scary running your own business. And it was funny because most of the family that I was getting that advice from were actual entrepreneurs. My mom, my dad, my grandparents, even my great grandparents that weren't alive anymore, but just their value system was obviously all around me in my family system were all entrepreneurs.
Wow.
And but I think it's tough, sometimes, it's doing all the things, it's raising a family. They'd come over from, like, my great grandparents had come over from overseas, whether that was Ireland or Scotland or Ukraine. And it's tough, like setting up your life in a new country when you don't have like, they left situations where they didn't have a lot. So they had to build from scratch. And I think that's the message that I would probably say to most women that are listening to this call, whether you're in your 30s or your 40s or your 50s and you're thinking about making that change, you're actually not starting from scratch. I would go back to my great grandparents when they came over from the Ukraine. Yeah, they were starting from scratch, and it wasn't necessarily, and trauma and all these other things that they had experienced back in their home countries versus me. Like, I can't say that that was like my experience because I grew up in Canada. I was fortunate that, we didn't have those type of experiences when I was growing up. And and I know people around the world who might be listening to this may be going through that right now, but I would still say for any woman that's listening, whether you're 30, 40, or 50, you've got experiences. You've got know-how. Like you've been out there, you've skinned your knees, right? Like you know things. And I think when you're thinking about leaving, maybe your corporate career to start a job, start your own business, again, you've got all this experience, skills, abilities, and that's what you need to count on, not the fact that you're starting from scratch and, oh, how do I work social media? How do I, build a website? How do I sell my offers? Well, how did you do all the other things that you've been doing since you were, zero on the planet, since you were born, right? You learned those things, you developed those things, and you just got better and better at, those skills, right? Those areas of expertise. So
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing that I would always say is you're not starting from scratch when you're thinking about pivoting and going into your own business.
No, definitely. And it can sound good, but if you are not sure what to pivot into, right?
Hmm.
Know if it's another career or if it's your own business or how do you, sure you have experience, obviously, whether it's leadership, whether it's, a specific function, um,
Hmm.
years of that experience. But how did you figure out that for you it will be consulting, coaching, and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is going back to what you love, right? So there can be just sort of that intrinsic, like, what do you value, what do you love, and where do you want to see yourself continue to focus? I mean, in my corporate career, I wore multi hats, but there was something that I always loved doing, which was developing leaders. Even when I came out of university and my sort of first job, I was plunked right into a management apprenticeship program, and I learned how to communicate effectively and how to, help people out with their performance goals and help people feel, motivated. Everyone, I guess I would always say that everyone just motivates themselves, but at the same time, it was like motivated around a common goal that we had as a team. And I learned that at a very young age in leadership, but it was always something that I just loved doing. And so I would say to anybody, go back to those things. Like, look at first, like, the skills, the abilities, the talents that you have. And that could be anything. Like, maybe you're really great at Excel. I'm not. So congratulations if you are. Or maybe you love playing basketball. Like write down all of it. Don't eliminate anything, right? Count everything as being like, what are the things that people count on you as far as those skills, those talents and abilities. Then the next thing I think you would look at is your values, your passions, your beliefs, and check in with those because some of them might be a little bit outdated. There might be ones that maybe traditionally, maybe through religion, maybe through family practices, you've just inherited. Like, oh, these were the ones that my grandparents really valued. And that's fine. You can bring those forward. But if they're not relevant to today, because maybe your grandparents were going through things like the Depression or World War II, and so they valued different things at that time that might not be relevant for you right now in your career or where you're situated in the world. And so make sure that your values are present today. Like when this goes out, it might be 2025. So, what check in with your values and have like two or three that you can always count on because those help you make decisions. Like if I'm making a decision to go left or right in my business today, it's based off of my values and what's important to me versus what someone on Instagram is saying or someone on this podcast is saying today, right? Like even what I'm saying now or what you're saying, it's like I would always say to people, and then check in with your values, put it through that filter. So then you're clear on what you want to do next. And then I think the third thing is your experiences, your past experiences, the ones you're going through today, as far as present time, and then soon to be future, not 30 years from now, because we can't predict the future, but you can kind of know what's going to happen maybe in your life because you're going to set some intentions around this is where I want to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, or even this time next year. and just play in that field. And then in the middle of that, there's going to be a sweet spot, something that you just love doing that's going to pop off the page. You know, you're going to see your skills, your talents, your abilities, your values, your passions, your beliefs, and your experiences and be like, that's it. That's what I love doing. And then I would say go validate that. Go talk to like five of, good friends, colleagues, maybe some family, but also just as a caveat, nothing about asking family, but they'll want you to be safe, right? They'll always want to make sure that you are safe and protected and loved and cared for. So they may not tell you to take that risk. They may tell you not to, quit your corporate job. So take their advice, but also blend it in with some colleagues, some friends, or maybe you have some clients. Maybe you've got like a bit of a side gig. Ask them, what am I known for? What do you count on me for? And if it matches in with some of the things that you've already done some of that internal work on,
Mm-hmm.
that's probably what you should do. And then now just go monetize it because you already know that people count on you for it and you love doing it. So why not make money doing it?
So, well, many women that I talk to actually don't like necessarily what they're doing, or maybe what they're become good at,
Hmm.
through utilizing some of the things that are not their natural strengths, by going into a career and just following, the ladder, kind of what happened, the progression, the
Right.
advancement, but somewhere they feel unfulfilled and burnt
Mhm.
out. And then I think that's where a lot of the issues start to come up, about not knowing where to go next because you feel so lost. Because one thing that you know is that whatever you've been doing, it's like you don't necessarily care to do one more day, whether
Right.
it's for yourself or somebody else. So I was curious so what did you at 48? So you're at this spot, you've been already before that thinking, it's been on your mind.
Hmm.
Is this kind of is this the analysis that you did and went through for yourself? And kind of what did you come up with as that first iteration and the first step?
Yeah. I mean, well, the first thing I did was really sort of look at my life where it was, but not from a analytical standpoint. I wanted to, okay, this is where my life is today. And what do I love about it? And what do I want to keep doing?
Mhm.
So, what were the things that I were learned, like what did I love about sort of like things that were going in my life? And part of that was career, health, wealth, relationships, community impact, spirituality. I like sort of like all those domains of my life, not just career. Because I think that's what I often see is people want to change their career. So they go from one company to the next, or they go from company to starting their own business. But have they also checked into the other domains of their life?
Mhm.
Because it's one thing to kind of escape that job or quit that job and go someplace else or start a business. But if there's other things in your life that aren't necessarily incongruent to or congruent, sorry, I should say, to your values, to your goals, then there's still going to be something that's not, I'm not looking for balance. It doesn't have to be perfect fit, but there's still going to be something that's off. And, just as an example for myself, I knew that things were off in my career. I wasn't necessarily satisfied with what I was doing in my corporate job anymore. I couldn't see myself doing not just the work that I was doing at one company and then go switch to another company for another 20 to 25 years until I like so-called retired at 65 type of thing. I was like, there's no way I'm going to stay here doing this or go to another company and do it all over again. But the other things that weren't necessarily congruently happening in my life that I wanted for my life was my marriage at the time was failing. And we both weren't putting the energy, the effort, the compassion, whatever you want to call it, into it, and it was done. But I wasn't dealing with that. And then there were things going on in my health. Like I was traveling all the time for work. I was living off of Doritos and red wine in hotel rooms. I wasn't working out. I wasn't caring for my body. And I was like basically like, the next poster child for developing like a long-term illness or, fatal disease. So for me, it was like there were a number of things that were out of check.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't just like, oh, go switch a job or go start a business. It was like I needed to get myself aligned in all areas of my life. And again, not perfect, but just like, okay, what do I want my health to look like? What do I want my relationships, family, friendships, colleagues to look like? What do I, want my spirituality? Because, as a kid, you follow whatever your parents tell you to do. But, I had different beliefs around organized religion, spirituality, mindfulness practices. So, like, this was my opportunity at 48 to make decisions about what I wanted my life to be versus just inheriting things that had already been sort of placed in front of me and just, accepted as being the norm, right? The bar to set. And so this was a chance to kind of review all of that. And so that's what I would say to anybody too, is that you might be dissatisfied in your job right now and thinking about what you want to do next, but also before you make that next move, check in with the other areas of life and get committed to those things. Because before you start that business, you want to make sure that the other areas of your life can also help you with that business. And as an example, I recognize like, taking care of my health was really important. So do I want to be working 70 hours a week in my business? No, that's what I was doing in my corporate job. Why would I want to do that again? I needed to change that. I needed to have other goals going on in my life besides just running a business. Um, and that helps keep me in check today because there's times where it's like I might finish off the week feeling really tired or burnt out or exhausted. And I just look back at my calendar and be like, oh, yeah, you didn't go for a midday walk on Tuesday like you said you were going to go, or you didn't do your workouts this week, or you didn't eat, whole foods. You went out and ate more dinners at restaurants or something.
Mhm.
I don't punish myself over it. I just look at my calendar and then book the stuff that I want to have in my calendar the next week and the next week after that. And then my business revolves around that versus I'm trying to squish my life into my business. So
Mhm.
I hope I answered your question there because I think, there is that debate about, well, I'm really unhappy. I don't necessarily want to just start a business doing something that I was doing in my corporate job. And I did do that the first couple of years of my business, and it wasn't great. Because I just kind of felt like I was doing what I was doing before, but without benefits and a bonus program, so, and I was working for a lot of CEOs instead of one CEO. And that kind of burned me out a little bit. So I think, but once I did that check-in around all areas of my life, then I really reshaped my business to help support that.
So let's maybe go into more of untangling kind of how you got here and
Mhm.
maybe a bit more to the origin story and starting with childhood. Tell us a little bit about little Brenda.
Little Brenda.
Oh, what you went to ended up going to school for in I know
Yeah.
I listen an interview.
Well, yeah, I was fortunate enough, like when I was born, my great great grandmother was still alive. So my mom, my grandmother, my great grandmother all had children at a very young age. So we had like a very young family. We were very like connected that way. So I had lots of um, aunts and uncles and generational family members around me to support me, which was, again, a privilege and something that I'm really grateful for because there was lots of advice and perspective and mentorship that came at a very early age. Whether that was around what I should do in education or how I cared for myself, the foods that we ate, the traditions that we, upheld as a family. But at the same time, my family was also somewhat fractured. My parents got divorced when I was 2. I was an only child in that relationship, and it wasn't a very great divorce. Not that divorce is great. It taught me something about divorce and co-parenting later on in life when I went through that process with my children's father. But at the time, it was a big struggle, and my mom struggled a lot with it. She was very young, a young mother. I think she struggled with like how to mature herself while raising a child on her own. My dad at the time, he was really young. He wasn't really in the picture when I was very young and sort of those formative years. Like later on, and even through my own sort of work around myself, managed to restore a better relationship as we got older. But younger Brenda, I was like always a little bit lost. I had like this, again, great collection of like people that cared for me, but I also felt a little bit abandoned, right? In the sense of my dad wasn't around and my mom struggled with a lot of emotions managing herself. So, yeah, school was fine. Sometimes it was hard. I wasn't necessarily like into sort of like, oh, I had to be like into math and sciences. For me, I gravitated more towards the arts. One of my grandmothers was passionate about art and music and opera and travel and history. And so I kind of glommed onto that. And I've always been passionate around it. I studied political science in university, but also with art history. Not that they go together, but I was just passionate about history. And so that's always been a part of me, like traveling to new countries, learning about cultures, history. Even if I'm watching a movie, on TV that's, maybe historical fiction, I'll go on my phone, check out Wikipedia. I want to like fact check some of the things that the characters are going through just to make sure that, oh, okay, this war happened. Did that actually happen that way? What was that battle? Like I'm always curious about what happened in the past and how it impacts us today. Because I think that in my general feeling, even around politics or government, it's like we have a lot of questions about how our leaders are governing us, but also it comes from a lot of things from the past, laws, how things have been created, wars that have been fought, countries that have aligned. And so I'm always curious about those things. And then how it impacts art and music, other cultural aspects of society.
Wow.
But I got started in business really early. I started working at the Gap when I was 21 after university.
So how
And it
did
was
you
just
go from loving history and arts
into
into
business.
yes.
Well, again, I think like my family had always been running businesses. So it was like, even though I kind of resisted in some cases, I guess through education or schooling, I kind of always sort of came back to it. And it was always like sort of a natural source for me to blend in with. Um, so I'd be working in business, learning about business, learning how to manage companies and people and teams and drive for results. And then I could go home and talk about it with my dad or my grandfather or whatever and my grandparents and get their get their take on things, how to manage people, how to build teams. And they would have their way of doing it because they were entrepreneurial. And then I would have this corporate lens of like process and policy and operations and large scale organizations. And so there was always a little bit of conflict, sometimes arguments about who had a better way of running businesses. Um, but it always added interesting debate. So I grew my career in retail operations. I moved into HR. I didn't know what HR at the time was. I was just really good at training people and developing leaders. And so they wanted me to head up, a new program in the organization I was working for at the time, and it existed in HR. So I had to move over to HR, and then all of a sudden I'm reporting into a vice president of HR, and I was like, "What's this?" And she just saw me as being like this moldable person that just wanted to like learn as much as I possibly could. So she got me into recruitment and compensation and benefits and learning about all aspects of sort of the, talent management cycle. And then I just continued to move and grow in those areas, but I always had a foot still in operations and sales because that to me was more the epicenter of the business. And yes, learning the back end people systems were important, but I just always wanted to be a part of that. So as I continued to grow my corporate career, I grew it in HR, but then I would take on other functions in the business that nobody else wanted to take on, like IT or communications, or when digital marketing became really hot, I learned, like I self-taught myself in that area and then started building teams around that to help out the various organizations I was with to make sure that we were, leading in those aspects of business. Yeah, and it took me to the point where I got myself up to COO level and working with like national brands, doing lots of expansion between either Canada and US or US and Canada, other international markets. So there's lots of travel, building teams, meeting with customers. And then, yeah, then it got me to the point where I was like 48 years old. I just didn't want to do it anymore. Not at that scale. I still wanted to work with entrepreneurs like I'm doing today, but just not at that scale where if I'm going to travel, I want to travel and get off the plane and like see the place that I'm visiting versus, going from hotel room to hotel room.
So was it the rhythm, kind of the pace and the volume of like where you couldn't fit like the other priorities and the values of your life that kind of pushed you to make
Yeah,
that?
I mean, definitely at the time, because like I mentioned earlier, I was going through my divorce and my girls were, I have two daughters and they were, young teenagers at the time, kind of going into teenagehood. Now they're like emerging adults and they're at university. But, at the time it's like it was sort of like questioning everything, like, okay, I had these children, but yet I'm not around. I'm in this relationship, but, it's not loving, it's not caring. I can't see us like continuing. I've got this career, yet I don't want to be in it for the next 20 to 25 years. There was all these sort of juxtapositions of like, I have this and it looks great on paper, but it's not necessarily, um, it's not fulfilling me. It's not like making me want to continue to do this. And so, not that I really wanted to kind of give it up. I wanted a new challenge. I think, fundamentally, when I think about leaving my corporate career. It wasn't so much of like I didn't like it. There's still aspects of it that I miss and I love about it. But for me, it was more I needed something different. I needed to create something different for myself. And yeah, and that was like when I said earlier about looking holistically at my whole life. It wasn't just like, oh, I just need to start a business or I needed to go to a different company. I'd even done that. Like 4 years before I quit my corporate job, I had moved from a really great position in another organization to another one, thinking that would like be
Mhm.
enough. But it was just really a band-aid at the end of the day.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, when you talk about just one aspect, just career can be overwhelming for people or a big challenge, let alone all the other areas, right? That you were looking to essentially overturn or tackle in addition to the career. So, um, how, because like you said, you have daughters, their
Mhm.
financial aspect, how did you untangle it, like in the practical?
What do you mean?
Well, overturning all those aspects,
Hmm.
the relationship, the work, going out on your own, uh,
Right.
well, obviously still needing to provide for yourself, for your daughters, because obviously that's a one big aspect of what keeps people back from um, leaving their job.
Yeah. So I fundamentally believe that, especially I think as midlife women, we can figure out ways to make money. Making money is not really sort of, I think, the issue. It's doing what you love and really making that conscious decision to live the life based on your terms. So it takes a number of years, I think, to unwire that or maneuver through that. I don't think it's just necessarily like go away to a weekend retreat and you'll figure it out. Like I think it takes months and years of committed action to see that transformational change and to also bring people along that are important to you in your life. Like, like we talk a lot about, I think, in the online space, I'll hear it from other business coaches or people maybe more on the mental health, like the therapy side of things, talking about setting boundaries. Setting boundaries with people that are important to you in your life takes a lot of work. And again, it's something that you just need to be committed to doing. I'm not saying don't start it because it takes too long. I'm saying start it, but get committed to it. So for me, when I left my corporate job, it was probably like almost 3, 4 years of really like concentrated work on myself to get myself up to the place where I think like that sort of level of self-actualization when you think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the lowest rung is like sort of personal safety and security. Well, I knew I could do that. Like my first year of not being in my corporate job, I wasn't making any money, but I relooked at my investment portfolio because that was like, just as an example, under it's like sort of a domain of my life, wealth. I have been contributing to, in Canada, we have RRSP programs similar to like 401k programs. I've been contributing, taking like whatever, 5% off, 10% off my checks, putting them into account, but never really looking at it.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I did when I quit my corporate job is I took a course in financial planning and financial wealth management because I didn't really know anything about it. I was just putting my money into account. Some broker, wherever, I don't even know who they were, was managing my account, managing my retirement fund, but I was like not even aware of it. So I took a course in financial planning and wealth management, and then I started looking at my investment portfolio. And I started making different decisions around my investment portfolio. And in the span of 18 months, I shifted my portfolio that was generating maybe like a 6 to 8% return to a 26% return
Wow.
just from focusing on that. And so that taught me that I can make money lots of different ways. I don't have to do it the traditional sense of like, I have to go to a job, I have to work 9 to 5, I have to work in an office building, climb the corporate ladder. It was like, okay, I had built up a certain level of wealth. I wasn't doing anything with it, and I didn't understand how to make more money. Once I learned how to understood how to make money in different ways, it got me thinking about, okay, what do I want like the next 50 years of my life to look like? Do I want to work for somebody else? Do I want to work for myself? What would I do if I work for myself? How many hours do I need to put into it? Because it wasn't like even that business was the only way that I could make money. I recognize now my investment portfolio was another way to make money.
Mhm.
I also recognize when I focused on myself, I learned how to ask for things that I wanted. That brought in like a level of wealth to me. I got more time back in my schedule. time is money,
Hmm.
right? So I think sometimes we think about, well, I have to quit my job and then I have to go start a business and it has to make this much money. How do I support myself? I wasn't supporting myself, even if I was making like a six-figure salary or multi-six-figure salary as a corporate executive. I wasn't supporting myself because I was just as fast as I was making it, paycheck to paycheck, I was also spending it on bags and shoes and silly things that weren't really fulfilling me. But once I started working on myself, my mindset, my health, just
Hmm.
like the whole mind, body, spirit piece of like how we're equipped, I had a lot more wealth available to me. I had a lot more time available to me. I realized in the span of a year not working in corporate, I wasn't spending as much money. I didn't need to show up in a certain way. I didn't need to have this like persona. I was like more comfortable in my skin and like being okay not wearing like, luxury clothes or whatever those things were, the car, the image, right? It was just like I'm just going to be who I am and people are going to accept me for who I am. But the first 48 years on the planet, I was trying to do everything to please everybody else.
Hmm.
So I think I hope I'm answering the question because I think it's a lot more of that insightful work that I think you need to do versus, oh, start a business today, check a box. And because I think that's for me, that would have been another pattern of just repeating what somebody else had told me to do
Hmm.
versus doing that internal work and spending the time on it.
And so you essentially you quit your job, and then
Mhm.
how did the consulting, like how did you start and what kind
Yeah, so I
of
took I'll be honest, I took a year off. I
Mhm.
needed to take a year off. I needed to like just really like reset things like health wise, relationship wise. Our like I mentioned earlier, our divorce was just kind of like lingering. I needed to get the divorce finalized. We needed to get the paperwork signed. Like I just needed to get the kids settled, my life settled. So I took that year to do that. And then near the end of the year, probably about like month 10, uh, like throughout the year, I had recruiters calling me, like, come back, we got a job for you, got a job for you. I'm like, no, no, I just really need to kind of like take this time and think through what I want to do next.
Mhm.
And then a good friend of mine, she was a consultant. She couldn't work with a client. She was at capacity. She got me connected with a client. And so I started working with them, just doing some fractional operational support in their business. They needed it at the time. They were beyond capacity and they just need more sort of strategic leadership in the team. And so I came in and I worked with them for about 3, 4 months. They ended up becoming like a big client of mine as I continue to open up my business. And that kind of gave me the perspective like, huh, okay, I could do this. I could also work like 20, 25 hours a week. I don't have to be showing up in the office every day. And this was before COVID happened. And then when COVID happened, it was like also a great blend of worlds where it's like, okay, I could take on other clients from other locations, not even where I was based in Western Canada. Didn't have to worry about travel, didn't have to worry about all those expenses, and I could, work where we're working right now over Zoom. And so it just gave me a whole new perspective on what I could be doing. But I started doing fractional work because that just made the most sense to me. It's like I did eventually need to start making money again. I needed to provide for my girls. They had needs. They needed to do like whether it's like paying for volleyball camp or things like that. I wanted to make sure that they still had access to those things. So, yeah, but I did what was just came naturally to me. And I would say that to anybody, like if you want to start a business, do what comes naturally to you. But then, if you want it, I think to like for me, it was like I'm going to be in business for a long time. And so I'm okay with the fact that I'm going to start a business looking like this, and then it's going to evolve into something else, and then it's going to evolve into something else. Like I've gone through 3 iterations of my business in the last 6 years. And I think that's okay. Some people give me advice saying, no, you should have had it figured out 6 years ago. Well, yeah, like why? Like, where's the rule book on that, right? And again, I don't want to follow somebody else's rule book. I've been doing that for 48 years. This is my opportunity to create my own, like, my own checklist, my own rule book about how I'm going to live my life. So I think that's the beauty of it too with entrepreneurship. It's never going to be like perfect the first time you open your business. And if you're open to the idea of it working sometimes, not working, failing, learning from it, starting again, it can it can be a really joyful experience.
Yeah, I think it's very it's quite typical that people because you can have one idea and then it morphs into something else. You test it out and you actually see how it works, and maybe people start coming to you for completely something else, or some ideas don't take off, and then
Mhm.
you have to pivot into something else. So this linear kind of I think that's also a lot of pressure what people feel is to figure out like the perfect idea that will work
Mhm.
100%. But tell us, so how, so you are doing operational consulting, it sounds like, fractional
Yeah. Yeah.
consulting.
Well,
How did
I've moved out of the fractional, and now what I do is I support women entrepreneurs that want to start up their business, that want to go through the same journey that I went through 6 years ago, and hopefully maybe cut out a couple steps, save them a few dollars, those type of things from my own learnings, because I think that's always the beauty of it, right? Work with somebody that's maybe a couple years ahead of you that like is going through the same thing that you're going through, and can give you that advice, that coaching, that mentorship, right? So I tend to work with women that are either in their corporate job that want to exit and start their own business, but need to do sort of that whole check-in around life, relationships, health, and then go into starting their own business. Or maybe they've already started, maybe they're year one, year two, year three, somewhere in that sort of entry level. And, it's not necessarily going as well as they think. Like maybe they think that they need to scrap it and start again. And I'm like, wait, let's not. There's probably something good here. We just need to kind of do a little bit of assessment work, pull out the good stuff, remodel the stuff that's not working. But we again don't need to start from scratch again or scrap things that are in place. And think about how do we just continue to build versus redo. And yeah, I mean, again, I tap back into I talked about my family. I just remember having a conversation with my great grandfather. He passed away when I was 19, but probably like maybe when I was like 15 or 16, I had this conversation with him. And I always thought of him as being like a grocery store owner. And he did. Like when he came from the Ukraine, he came into Montreal and he worked in the coal mines and made some money and then moved out to Edmonton and married my great grandmother. And they first had a house with a little farm. And then they bought another bigger farm and put a grocery store on it because the community was getting bigger and they needed like a grocery store for ordering supplies and things like that. So he had a small store, then they made the store a bit bigger. Then he sold the store and then he bought an apartment building in Vancouver. Like they may move from Edmonton to Vancouver and he bought an apartment building. And so I always used to say to him, like, you were in the grocery store business. He's like, no, I was in the real estate business. I was always
Mm.
developing real estate. And whether I had a farm on it or a grocery store or an apartment building, it was always about that. And I was like, oh, okay. So he's like, don't think of like your business as just being one thing. It can grow into so many different other things. So that's what I've always sort of thought about with business. It's like it's not finite
Mm.
and it doesn't have to be perfect and it's always going to change.
That's an amazing story and example. And can you share with us your own iterations? So how did you evolve and kind of what did you go through in terms of your, from your consulting to what other things did you try?
Well, I think for me in my own journey, because it's again, I didn't want my business to be like separate from my life and like life being like all the other things outside of business, like raising two daughters, working on my own sort of mindset. So I was going through, I always like one of my values is curiosity and learning. And so I'm always like learning new things. And so there's probably some aspects of what I was going through in my life. Like I studied EFT tapping so that I bring that into my coaching or my business practice, right? I'd fold that in.
Mhm.
And I still do that today to some extent, but I think it's more about at the end of the day, I'm still a business coach, and there's other things that I learned that I think might be appropriate for one client or another client that will help them make that transformation. So, yeah, I think that sort of goes back to it. Like when I started my business 6 years ago, I was more in that fractional HR operations space, helping small businesses grow to like medium-sized businesses, if that's what their goal was, and helping to put the infrastructure in realizing that, what, I'm good at doing that, but I'm not like loving that. And so like still what I love and like what I, people count on me for is that development and like that personal development of where they go. And so I learned more about life coaching, more about mindfulness practices, how to fold that into business, maybe leaning more on the feminine side of business versus the masculine, and bringing that more forward more. I would coach men, women, uh, starting up their businesses. But then really in the last like few years, I've honed in on this midlife woman, partly because like that's how I identify myself. Women that are midlife, women that, have lots of things going on in their life. They're caring for many people, whether that's teams of people that they lead, their children, if they have children, people in their communities, aging parents, aging family members. Like we've got lots of things that are sort of converging on us. And then there's also like the big health thing that we're navigating, right? Perimenopause, menopause that no one tells you about. And like we just have to kind of figure it out on our own or get really curious about, again, something I've been learning more about and how that impacts my decision making and how many hours I want to put into my business. Do I want to work a 10-hour day? No, not when I'm like struggling with like maybe insomnia or hot flashes. Like I want to maybe work like a 2-hour day and feel good with that.
Yeah, no, right. You kind of start to experience different things in your body, and you're like, what the heck is this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's just like, I don't want my business to be like, oh, I have to churn out 20 things today, regardless of how like I'm physically feeling. So I've created a business where it's like, I know I can still bring in the revenue that I want and doing it on my terms versus I need to like override anything that's important to me, anything that I value in order to make that revenue.
And of course, now, in at least from me listening to you, it makes sense because that was your own journey. That probably was closest, most relatable, right? You have been through it. You're, going through it. You've lived it. But how was it for you? How did that ta-da happen? Oh, yes, this is the niche or the focus, if you will, that I'm gonna work with midlife women, helping them start or accelerate, or strengthen their businesses.
I think it was just, a number of things. Like, there were, like, say, a group of women that my daughters had gone to the same school, like an elementary and high school that were in proximity. So, like, say, the mothers of the families that we knew over 14, 15 years as they were going to school were aging like me. And I hear side conversations about, like, oh, I don't want to go back to the office. I'm just like, I didn't have a good sleep last night, or I'm struggling with this, and my doctor said this, and I need to go on this type of medication, and then yet I have to do this at work. And then even through my own research, like now there's tons of stuff. Everyone's all talking about perimenopause and menopause, and there's physicians and therapists, and that are all pivoting their business to focus on midlife women. But I think probably when I was starting to get those early day symptoms of perimenopause and then talking about it with my friends or family group that were in that same area age, realizing that there wasn't a lot of content out there. There wasn't a lot of resources and there wasn't a lot of conversation happening around it. And not that I wanted to approach it from a like healthcare standpoint, because I'm not a trained professional in that area, but it was more about how could you create your business that revolves again around your life versus your life revolving around your business. And I think as midlife women, we are brilliant. Number one, we've gone through tons of things. Like if I think of sort of like where you might be like, 40, 50, 60. And again, I'm not making assumptions for everybody that's like listening on the call, but I think, we were that generation that all went to school, like, all had the opportunity potentially to go to school, depending on where we live in the world, and what was going on for us. Maybe our mothers didn't. Some of our mothers did, some of our mothers didn't. Our grandmothers probably didn't. I know my grandmother wanted to go to university and she had the grades to go to university. She was one of the top students in her high school, but my great grandfather didn't want girls going to university. He didn't believe in his daughters going to university.
Mhm.
And, so she always talked about that with me about that was one of her biggest regrets is that she wasn't able to go to university.
Mhm.
So, I think that my generation was probably the generation that it was available to us, whether our families could afford it or not. It was more available, more acceptable for obviously women to go to a university. And it's definitely that way for my daughters. So, I think we had like this opportunity, like we have this opportunity, I think, to really shape business the way we want it to be because we've had the opportunities to do certain things in our career, in our life that maybe our mothers and our grandmothers didn't have. Um, and yeah, so I think it was just opening that conversation to it that, and I was just hearing from so many women that had started businesses. Like I would go into like other memberships or other communities and they would just talk about how they were tired and burnt out and and not feeling fulfilled. And maybe they should just go back to their corporate job because at least they got a day off, or, the office would close at 5 o'clock and, they would shut down. And I'm like, well, why can't we just build that ourselves in our business?
Mm.
So
Yeah,
I think that, I wanted to unlock that question, and I wanted to be that source of like answering that question for women. So partly it was just like using my own life experience. Like if I was working 70 hours a week, it's like, well, why am I doing that? Why am I still taking on that behavior that I learned in corporate and bringing that into my business? I have a choice not to make that happen.
yeah, that's actually one of the things that I've heard, and many people assume, and it's kind of a given. They think when they start their own business that many times they'll have to work even more
Hmm.
than in their job, because in their
Yeah.
job they had paid vacations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Not everybody works 70 hours a week,
Hmm.
and I hear that sometimes women are working many more hours than they were in corporate. How did you kind of, what from all your experience, like what
Hmm.
is most important or key not to be not to get in that model, not to end up in that model?
Yeah, well, this is again where it's like I had to relearn this or just learn it because I don't think I was ever taught this when I was younger, was to put your body first. And, so I think when you put your body first, you're listening more to your body. And what I mean by that is like I started doing like little check-ins with myself, midweek check-ins, end of week check-in. How am I feeling today? Thoughts, feelings, all through the body. Oh, like my neck is stiff. Like I'm feeling really tired. I always seem to be really hungry. Like I'm not feeling satiated. And so then I'd start snacking and stuff like that. But I would start listening to my body, taking note of things, journaling things. And then I would, if I didn't know how to solve it myself, I would go ask people, so like the hunger thing, like again, understanding, okay, perimenopause, you're not necessarily, because of the hormone shifts, you're not necessarily digesting food the same way. You end up like keeping more food on, right? Like keeping more calories on. It's harder to lose the weight. You're feeling more sluggish. You don't necessarily want to maybe work out as much, depending on what symptoms are resonating for you during perimenopause. But then I would go and ask nutritionists and my doctor, and I'd want to understand. And they'd be like, okay, well, you need to have more protein during the day. You need to eat 50 grams of protein in the morning and do these type of things. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I didn't know that.
Mhm.
And like no one ever told me that. And no one ever like called me up when I turned 40 to say, hey, you're going to be going through perimenopause and you should think about shifting. Like I never used to eat breakfast.
Mm.
And so, in my own business, like working on things like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I would start feeling hungry or listless. So I would grab a snack versus if I'd been eating better throughout the morning and to midday, by the time I got to 2 o'clock, I was fine. So it's like I had to shift some of those things around. Now, and someone's going to be listening and be like, well, how does that help you out with your business? And I'm like, well, it's all connected, right? Like I think in my younger years, I would just like live off of Diet Coke or Doritos or red wine and just push myself through to the brink of exhaustion and burnout. And I would take that same behavior into my business. I had to like cut that off and I had to relearn how to like care for myself so that
Yeah.
I could actually have the strength, the tenacity, like, all those things. Because I think as you get older and going through perimenopause as a woman, the energy that you had in your 20s is not the same anymore. Like, it's just not the same. And it's not about feeling bad about yourself or, beating yourself up that you're getting older. It's just a fact. But at the same time, you can still feel better in your body by taking care of your body. So for me, like my number one business strategy is put my body first. Then like business is like sort of number seven, right? It's kind of like body first, check in with like relationships, have a date night with my partner. Like there's certain things that go on my calendar before I even look at my business.
Mm.
And when those things are in check, then it's like I can go into my business today and whether or not I work 5 hours or 10 hours, I feel good about the work that I did. And I don't feel like I'm sacrificing something over here, because of my business, which is what I felt continually like guilt, shame, frustration in my 20s and 30s in my corporate job.
Kind of just having that whole, like whole foods, but whole life, taking care and paying attention to every aspect of your life so it's
Yeah.
not always like Peter robbing Peter, paying Paul.
Exactly. Like I want to be on the planet until I'm 100. I want to be a centurion. I might still be working like in my business when I'm 80. Like I'm not I know I won't be doing what I'm doing today in my business when I'm 80 because I'll have learned some other things and decide, that's really where I want to focus and these are the type of clients I want to work with. But I could see myself working when I'm 80 on something in a business, making money, helping people, contributing to my community, but I'm going to do it on my terms with whatever feels good for me, like physically where my body's at, what I feel I can contribute to. And if that's like 2 hours a week, great.
Yeah, love that. So let's say somebody's in their 30s, 40s,
Yeah.
um, whatever age, and they want to change something, right? That the satisfaction is built up, like that
Mhm.
lacks some kind of sense of something missing is there, but they are at a crossroad to make this decision. Do they start their own business or do they just need to change their career? Based on
Mm,
experience, right? Who How does a woman determine, because business is not a path for everybody, not
right.
everybody necessarily has a natural strength and needs to start a business. How does one
hmm
determine which way is their way?
Yeah. Well, two things I would say is I agree with you that not everyone is going to be successful at doing a business, yet I want to make sure that all women have accessibility into starting a business. It was not something that was granted to me, even though I mentioned my background as far as my family. And every job I worked for entrepreneurs, startups, people that were like expanding their businesses. I worked for family business owners, but no one ever tapped me on the shoulder when I was working in those corporate jobs to say, you should become an entrepreneur. So, first and foremost, I do believe that every woman has the opportunity to become an entrepreneur if they choose to want to do that. And if they also do it for a short period of time, like 5 years, and then go back and work for somebody else, that's cool too. The second thing I would say is before you start your business or leave to go to another career, another company, is check in with your vision, your values, and your goals for all those domains in your life that I mentioned: health, wealth, community impact, spirituality, relationships, and your career.
Hmm.
You need to have a vision in your life. And I'm talking about the next 5, 10 years of your life. Like, where are you going? It doesn't have to be like, oh, on July, 1st, 30, 36, I'm, eating pizza at this shop. Like, it doesn't have to be that specific, but it's like, who are you spending time with? What are you spending time doing? Like, what lights you up? What gives you joy? What's your health going to be like 10 years from now? Because that's the thing too. Like when I think about women and weight and all the messaging that's out there, it's like, oh, I need to lose 20 pounds by summer. And it's just like, what if like in 10 years from now, I said, I can get out of bed in the morning and I don't have joint pain. Like it just feels good to go for a walk today.
Hmm.
Like, my body feels strong. I can lift, I don't know, a laundry basket without like, oh, my back hurts or whatever, right? I get to like enjoy my dinner without worrying about calorie counts and all this sort of stuff or whatever. I can just be like on vacation, eating like a croissant and loving it, right? And not worried about things. Like being able to declare what you want your life to be like 5, 10 years from now and just be clear about it. And don't get so like caught up in a to-do list or what's happening on Friday at 2 o'clock. It's just like, this is where I see things happening. And then check in with your values. We have values, we have beliefs, we have passions. Are they still current today for you? And if they are, how are they showing up in your calendar? Like what you value should be in your calendar.
Hmm.
And if
Okay.
it's not, start booking it. And then your goals, like you should have goals around those different areas of your life. Do you have a goal for spirituality this year? Do you have a goal for relationships? Do you have like, Scott and I, my partner and I were like, we were talking about this over the last couple of weeks around relationship goals with other couples. Like, who are some of the couples we want to spend some time with in 2025? Doing some fun things with, whether it's like playing cards on a Friday night or going to a comedy club or going for a hike on a Saturday, but like who are like, 3 or 4 couples that we just want to spend more time with,
Hmm.
doing couple things together. And it's like having those goals just lights you up. But I
Hmm.
think oftentimes we just get into those routines of like brushing our teeth, getting kids to school, going to work, and then we feel tired, we feel exhausted. So it's like checking in at least once a year, vision, values, and goals on all domains of your life.
Mm.
And then decide, yeah, is that company, that next company that's recruiting you, the one that you need to go to? Your vision, values, and goals will tell you. At least you have something to check in with, right? That you can make those decisions on. And it's rooted in something that you believe in versus, oh, the job ad sounded good. My boss doesn't like me right now. Like things that just might not even matter 10 years from now.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely, kind of like what you're saying, if you just take health and your body and wanting vibrancy, right, and mobility and ease of movement and feeling good when you wake up, then um, building in, it can be on the day to day, right? So easy to go start work or react or do the things that you are on your long to-do list, but this is still something I'm coming back to. Like, okay, no, you need to do that then 30-minute mobility, like different joint movements and fat,
Right.
stretching out your muscles. If you don't want to bend, have these injuries with not sexy stories behind them,
Right.
like
Yeah.
lifting, something out of the bathtub and like, oh my God,
Yeah.
back pain out of nowhere. But I love,
Yeah, and again, things that are going to matter 10 years from now versus things that just don't matter, right? Like, I mean, we talk about creating sustainable businesses in corporate, right? That are going to be around like 5, 10, 15 years from now. What are you doing to be around, like in your life, 5, 10, 15? And I'm not talking about something morbid. I'm just talking about like being present, like being checked in versus like 5 years have gone by and I said I was going to do this and I never did it, or 10 years have gone by and I said I was going to do this and I never did it. Like, why not? Like set a goal, set an intention and make it happen. It kind of goes back to like my investment portfolio. Like I was investing money in my RSP, my retirement savings, but I wasn't like intentionally investing. I was just like letting somebody else do it. And once I took it over, I actually saw that I could generate a lot more wealth than I ever thought was possible.
Mhm. That's a,
So, that's where it's like we can sit there and look back 5 years and go, yeah, I could have generated more wealth for myself. Set a goal today, start doing it,
mhm. Yeah,
put it in your calendar.
especially in those areas that we like ignore or hide from, like an ostrich. I pulled up one of the emails that you send out to your community, and
Hmm.
I just love it. Like, I quit my corporate executive career at 47. I took my first gap year at 48. I
Hmm.
started my consulting business at 49. It tanked when global pandemic started at 50.
Yeah.
In love with Scott at 51, and I'm 55. Oh, that is just so amazing and inspiring, and what a great example.
Thank you. I mean, I guess the thing is, and I saw this article the other day, like we celebrate a lot of like, top 40 under 40, which
The
I
top
love.
30 under 30.
Top 30 under 30. What about the top like 70 under 7, like, the top 70 under 70, right? Like we're going to live, and especially women, I think if we put our body first, we are going to live a long time on the planet. There's a lot. We've got a long runway. We don't need to get this all figured out now. So again, going back to your 30 something year old audience where probably like me, like me quitting my job in my late 40s, I was already thinking about some of these things that were not necessarily making me happy in my 30s. I would say to everybody that's in their 30s right now or their mid 30s, think about having a second career pathway. Like, if you're an accountant and you're 35 and you're sitting at your desk, you might not be you could do so much more if you wanted to than just being an accountant, and nothing wrong with being an accountant. Or if you're a fashion designer, or if you are a copywriter, right? Like there are multiple possibilities. And I look at my parents sometimes as that role model. Like my mom has had 4 careers in her life. She was a high school teacher. She was a fundraiser. She's a political campaigner. Like she's done different things in her life, completely opposite, like, this over here and this over here. So you can build those things for yourself too.
I love that. I love having these conversations and examples because somehow we can get so um tunnel vision sometimes and so focused that, oh my God, like I've been doing this for 15 years. There's no option to switch, or it's so hard, or I'm gonna have to take entry level salary, like in these kind of pessimistic stories, but that's why I love that you're sharing. I think you're kind of shining light of what's possible. What is interesting to me, though, is that you had the entrepreneurship modeled for you and all around you, and you
I
were
know.
so on this corporate train. Like,
I
what?
know.
Usually it's the other way around, where people, their parents have been working for a company. They're like, well, it will be safe. Like, oh, entrepreneurship won't work, because they don't really have the experience or a
Hmm.
successful entrepreneurship like close to them.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. And yeah, so there's always been a little bit of a rebel in me that way, I guess, right? Like not being told what to do, always trying to find a different route to do it. Even if what they told me to do was the easier route, I always wanted to try and find sort of a challenge. I'm a bit of a risk taker that way, I guess. But then it was kind of, sorry, I'm just gonna close my curtain. The sun has decided to wake up right now. I'm just gonna There. It's a little bit better. But I think that's the values check-in, right? For myself is when I did the work around what, like where I was making decisions in my life and how those decisions were playing out. When I checked in with my values and got recentered with the values, I realized looking back at, say, like my ancestors, they valued going into business for themselves, making their own money, making their own like way in life. And I realized actually I do really value that. And even though I didn't do that myself, like in my early stages of my career, I still aligned myself with other entrepreneurs that believe that too. And so, that confidence or that, green light to go start something, I had it. Like I always had it. And I probably put more doubt in my way and that created more hurdles for me, then I should have just like listened to that calling. Like I guess the thing is if I would say to anybody, like if I had that vision, values, work, skill, knowledge that I have now, back when I was 20, would my life look a little bit different? For sure it would have.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm not gonna like replace any of it because there's been like lots of great highs and moments and things that I've like, my kids, for example, like I would never like go back and rewrite my 20s and not have them in that storylines. So I think like there's like you just have to appreciate all of it
Yeah. And you
and
can
not like, and take the regrets and take the learnings and take all of it and just be like, okay, this is where I'm at right now. And it's actually a really beautiful journey. And I'm 55. And so technically I have another 45 years left on the planet. Like, what else can I create?
I love it. And you have a lot of energy and capacity, so it's amazing. Can you,
Yeah.
as we wrap up, can you share your story how you met your sweetheart at 51?
Oh yeah, online. Yeah. Like I decided that I was just going to start dating and meeting people, and so I went to dating online and we met, and it was during COVID, uh, and it was kind of actually a funny story because, being a single mom and dating, I didn't want to necessarily spend a lot of time driving to places to, coffee shops to meet men that I was meeting online. And so I put on my profile, like, I just want to meet people that are like 25 kilometers away from my home, right? Like just kind of in proximity. Like, and I think I don't know what happened on the dating site that we were on, the algorithm, it reset something. And so Scott and I got paired up. We started chatting. Everything was great. And then I found out like after a week of or 2 weeks of us chatting that he actually didn't live in Vancouver where I was living. He lived on Vancouver Island where I live now, which is actually like a 90-minute ferry ride away. It's a 40-minute drive. So it's like, 2.5 hours, 3 hours away
Wow.
commute. But for some reason, our profiles got paired up. The algorithm was broken or something. And I was like, oh, and he's like, is that going to be a deal breaker for you? And I'm like, well, I really like talking to you. No. Anyways, so we made it work and we, dated and saw each other, like, and kind of commuted for 3 years. And then this year in 2024, in April, after my youngest daughter graduated from high school, I moved over to Vancouver Island and now we're living together. But yeah, I think for me, that was also part of it is that I saw in my vision that I was going to fall in love again. I would find my life partner. We would be together. We would live near the ocean. We'd have our dogs. And that's what we're doing now.
Amazing. So Brenda, tell us how can we find you, follow you, and connect with you?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time on Instagram. So at it's Brenda Rigney, you can find me there. There's my website, brendarigny.com. Everything is just my first and last name. So like if you just Google Brenda Rigney, you'll find a bunch of things like LinkedIn, YouTube, Pinterest. Like I'm on kind of like all the sites. And then I have my Aligned AF community, which is for midlife women entrepreneurs. So you can come into the community, learn about entrepreneurship. There's lots of tools and templates in there. We have guest mentors. Myself will come in, will teach on various topics. But the most important thing about the community is that women get a chance to collaborate and partner and help grow our businesses together. So it's like if you want to get on a podcast, if you want to have someone like co-lead in your mastermind with you or find your next client, like there's an opportunity to do that inside the community.
Yeah, and I can speak to having joined it for one call, that
Mhm.
it's great women there. There's, great collaborative atmosphere and spirit, and people are really engaged. So, if anybody is interested in exploring and has that kind of idea or question mark or thought about possibly exploring entrepreneurship, I would highly recommend it.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the big thing. Like I mentioned earlier, no one was sort of tapping me on the shoulder saying entrepreneurship could be a possibility in your career plan. And I think that, some women might be thinking they want to do that. They look online. And I don't think you necessarily need to join like a $20,000 mastermind in your first year, or if you're still in corporate debating about what you want to do next. I mean, it's a good investment to make at some point or another, but I don't necessarily think it's like the most important thing that you need to do right away. And so the community is priced at a very affordable level. Like when this comes out, probably in the new year, it'll be at $9 a month. It's at $5 now. We're going to raise the price to $9 just to kind of cover taxes. And I mean, if Starbucks is charging like $7 or $9 for a cup of coffee, I'm going to charge that for the membership. But I wanted, like I said earlier, I want entrepreneurship to be accessible for women. I want it to not be something that is a roadblock. And, I want people to start learning about it even before they leave corporate so that they can make that decision financially, but also, all the things that you need to weigh in when you decide to leave your corporate job and start your business. So
I love that. I think it's an amazing resource. So thank you for doing that. And what is your vision or word of the year or wish for the year for
mm.
2025? Since, like you said,
Yeah, one of my members in my community asked me what my word of the year was the other day, and so I said sincerity. Um, Yeah, and I think that's so for me, that just means that whatever I say, it's like you can just take my word for it. That's actually sort of true. And so just being sincere about it, there's a little bit of compassion in there. Yeah, I think that's kind of needed right now in the world a little bit. It's just that sincerity of, honesty, integrity.
love that. Yes, that resonates. Thank you so much, Brenda. Thank you for your
Thank you.
time and for talking to us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.